In most parts of the world, when you ask people what the most annoying and nerve-wracking creature is, most of them will say flies. And they're right. Flies are truly irritating and pesky insects. They're also incredibly agile. Unlike mosquitoes, you can't kill them easily. You have to kill them without them noticing. Otherwise, they'll just fly away. Some people even say, "I wish mosquitoes and flies would go extinct." Most of them want flies gone more than mosquitoes, because flies also carry dirt and disease. Now, let's imagine humans have found a solution and eradicated all flies. What would happen? What would the world look like? No one has ever been able to calculate the total population of flies accurately. All the numbers we have are based on estimates. For example, one source says there are about 17 quadrillion flies on Earth at any given moment. That's a 17 followed by 15 zeros. The reason they say at any given moment is because flies have short lifespans. They die and are quickly replaced. Another source claims there are 17 million flies for every human on Earth. Again, this is just another estimate. But all of these figures point to one fact: flies are unimaginably numerous. And the problem becomes even more complex when we realize that biologists have identified over 120,000 species of flies worldwide. Flies are dirty. They're incredibly diverse, and their population is massive. However, entomologists argue that flies, as annoying as they are more useful than mosquitoes. These tiny insects have killed more humans in history than any other creature, primarily by transmitting diseases like malaria. Flies also spread germs and diseases, but they're not as deadly. For example, the tsetse fly in Africa spreads a disease called sleeping sickness, but it only lives in specific regions, not like mosquitoes, which can be found almost everywhere. This program is about flies. We want to see if it's possible to get rid of them all. Let's imagine we have the power to eradicate all flies on Earth. What happens then? First of all, flies wouldn't bother us anymore. They wouldn't buzz around our ears or land on our food. We wouldn't mind that at all. But what about nature? Can nature survive without flies? It can, but it would struggle. In other words, the entire ecosystem would be disrupted. The first problem is that plant pollination would be affected. While bees are the primary pollinators, flies also play a crucial role. Another disgusting but useful role of flies is that they land on the feces of various animals, consume the microbes, and then move on to decaying carcasses, where they also feed on microbes. In this way, they clean up nature and prevent the spread of diseases. It's true that if a fly lands on an apple you're about to eat, it contaminates it, but that's our problem. We need to ensure flies don't land on our food. Some tasks in nature are unpleasant, like vultures eating dead animals. Vultures are some of the most important birds in the world, calling them nature's heroes. Flies aren't heroes, but their work is beneficial. At this point, some farmers might object and say, "What are you talking about? Flies are pests." And they're right. Flies are a huge problem in agriculture. That's why farmers worldwide spend tens of millions of dollars to keep flies away from their crops. If flies were to go extinct, farmers would be happy because they'd save a lot of money on pesticides and other preventative measures. When flies land on fruit in orchards, they lay eggs that cause the fruit to rot. And since flies are so numerous, they can destroy the produce of several hectares of orchards at once. That's the harm they cause in agriculture. But in nature, they do the same thing on animal carcasses, where their larvae consume the microbes. This is incredibly beneficial to the ecosystem because it prevents diseases from spreading from these carcasses to other areas. In a way, you could say flies are like tiny scavengers. Entomologists studying cocoa trees have found that without flies, there would be no cocoa. That's because over 90% of cocoa tree pollination is done by these annoying creatures. Want a world without flies? Say goodbye to chocolate too. Some people might say, we don't want flies or chocolate. Get rid of both. But that's not everyone's opinion. So, is chocolate the only thing we'd lose without flies? Not at all. Listen carefully. The biggest issue with the absence of flies is the impact on other animals. Flies are a major food source for many creatures. Without flies, these animals would starve to death. The most well-known ones are frogs, small birds like sparrows, and various species of spiders. These three groups of creatures depend on flies for their survival. If flies were to disappear, they'd go extinct too. We mentioned earlier that there are 17 quadrillion flies, so no matter how many are eaten, it doesn't make a dent. Their population regenerates. That's why this process is called an ecosystem. When you remove or add a key species like what happened in Australia, the ecosystem gets disrupted. That's why we're told not to drive species to extinction. It's not just about losing one species. It's about damaging the entire ecosystem. Now, let's take a look at when flies first appeared on Earth. They've been around since the Permian period, about 260 million years ago. How do we know this? From the most well-preserved fly fossils found encased in amber. The most fascinating fossils are the ones perfectly preserved in amber, trapped inside a capsule for hundreds or tens of millions of years before being discovered by us. So, we've learned that if we eradicate flies, our lives might become more comfortable. But we've also realized that it's impossible. If humans tried to destroy all 120,000 species of flies using any method from nuclear bombs to extensive pesticide use, we'd end up causing many other species to go extinct too. Our own lives would become much harder as well. So, keep your fly swatters handy. Just kidding, they're still useful for your home. Flies aren't exactly useful creatures to ask, how much do you weigh? Let's bag you up.